Hey guys, it's Khandi with my review for the highly anticipated HBO film Fahrenheit 451. And what Fahrenheit 451 is essentially about is it takes place in this futuristic type setting where basically after a second civil war, all books have basically been banned, or any, freedom of expression that's kind of gone. They are now burnt by these firemen who literally just light the books on fire, and one of the firemen named Montag, he is very dedicated, but one day he actually starts to pick up a book and starts to get a little bit fascinated by it and basically starts to question whether or not he actually wants to continue doing this, and that's really all I'm going to say. So Fahrenheit 451, I was actually really looking forward to this movie. I thought it had tons of potential. I mean, just the cast and the premise. There was definitely a lot of interesting places that this film could really go. I am not someone who was familiar with the source material. I didn't read this book in school or anything like I'm sure many of you have, but I just thought it sounded really interesting, and I have to say, while this isn't at all a bad movie, this was honestly really disappointing. I really was not a huge fan of Fahrenheit 451. This is a very safe, sort of watered down adaptation that really felt like it was missing something, and we're just getting right now starting off with the cast. And I will say that was definitely, I think, one of the biggest draws to this film. One of the reasons people are probably going to see it is because of the cast, and the cast here, they are really good. I do think that there are some really good performances here. Michael B. Jordan, though, easily is the best thing about this movie. He's one of the best actors working today, so this really shouldn't be a surprise, but he really does bring a lot of layers to this role of Montag. Montag is someone who, like I said, he is very indecisive. He is very much contemplating whether or not he really wants to continue doing what he does. And, he starts off the film and he really feels like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do, but as it goes on, he gets more and more uncertain, and I thought he definitely did a really good job here, particularly towards the end of this film. I thought he got really good, and again, it's nothing amazing, but he really did do a great job here, and again, it really does show why he is one of the best actors working today. The film in general is very bland, but Jordan does actually bring some charisma and some energy to it, and I thought he did a really good job here. And then Michael Shannon as well, also I thought was pretty good. I did like his performance here. Nothing outstanding, nothing you haven't really seen him done before. He's kind of just doing the regular Michael Shannon shtick. The best way to describe it is this is kind of like the character he played in Shape of Water if that character didn't have nearly as many layers to him. We'll get to the character he's playing a little bit later, but I did think the two actually did have believable chemistry, and I did think he did a good job overall. And then the rest of the cast here, they're fine. Sofia Boutella, basically her main role is she's kind of the one that starts to get Montag to question himself and kind of opens up all these other possibilities, and I did think she did a good job. The chemistry between her and Jordan, though, it's just not there. These two, I don't think, work that well together. They're both very capable actors, but something about it, it just did not work for me, and I was not a huge fan of their back and forth. I thought that, when they first were, before they start this, romantic thing with them, I thought it worked, but once they go into a more romantic direction, it just really fell flat. Everyone else I thought was fine. No one really was amazing, and I thought the cast was just fine here. But now let's get to the directing and the writing, because that, for me, is probably the weakest element of this film. Now, I will say, in terms of directing, I don't think the directing is bad. I think Ramin Bahrani, he did do a good job with what he had here. The tone of this movie, it is right. It definitely does have that sort of dark, very dreary tone that you want it to have. It does feel a bit hopeless at points, but towards the, middle portion of the film, there does start to be a little bit more hope, and I did think that his directing was good here. The film is very dark, though, and there's rarely any humor or anything like that, and I do think that it was kind of missing just a little bit of levity to it that I wish it did have, and it just really wasn't there. And I feel like if it was, I feel like the movie would be just a little bit more engaging. But easily the biggest problem with this movie is the writing, because again, I don't think the acting and the directing are the problem. I think it's the writing. The premise in general is really interesting. The idea of just books being banned and people not being able to have that same freedom of creative expression and being able to, tell all these great stories. I mean, if there weren't books and scripts and things like that around, I would not be doing this right now. And that's pretty crazy to think about a world where that could actually happen. The problem is the movie is barely scratching the surface of that, and that's really all they do here. The firemen in general, their only purpose, it seems, is to burn these books, and that's really all we focus on. There's never a moment with Montag, for example, where we really see what his life is beyond burning these books. It seems like these characters don't really have a life outside of that, and I just didn't feel very believable to me. These characters in general are very underwritten. Michael Shannon especially, as good as he is in the film, he was very weak. His character is very one-note. It seems like he's only there just to burn books, and he's very adamant about it, and it just doesn't really work. You know, what drives this character? Why does he believe in burning these books? What is his personal connection to this? We just don't really know. We don't really get into that, and I think that's definitely what this film was really missing. It was missing that sort of relatability, It was missing that sort of humanism to these characters, because the only character that feels real is like Montag and some of the resistance members, but other than that, that's really it. These characters don't seem to have much of a life besides that, and I highly doubt that that's all they do in life. I'm sure there's more going on with them that we just didn't really see here. Also, the world building here I thought was incredibly weak. I mean, constantly throughout the film, the characters are mentioning things like the Second Civil War and all these things that happened, but because of the fact that this is a complete futuristic world that is very different from our own, those names have no significance to us. We don't know what they mean. Why is this important? What does this have to do with the burning of books? I mean, there's just no significance there, and it just did not work for me overall. And again, I really did feel like it was missing a lot. I really felt they could have delved a lot deeper into these characters, and they just don't. The film doesn't really go beyond, we burn books because it's morally right. There isn't really a deeper reason for it, and it felt like there was supposed to be. There should have been some sort of social commentary here. There are a lot of real-life parallels you can make here. You can talk about how, the message of this movie should be that, the media is, basically limiting, all these resources and things like that, and are forcing you to, basically forcing you to pick what you want, and it doesn't give you that choice to pick. It basically picks it for you, but the movie doesn't really get into that at all, and I think these are ideas that could have been really interesting, and the story in general, it should be very interesting, but it's really not, and to be honest with you, the first 20 to 30 minutes, I was honestly really bored. I really was not that into it. It felt very repetitive, and there just wasn't really a lot to it. It's not till this one scene happens involving this woman and her love of books that I thought was very well done that I really started to get more into this film, and there are good scenes like that, but it's just a parts of a very sort of bland whole. I just didn't really, like I said, care much about these characters except for Montag. Montag was actually becoming quite interesting, but when he becomes interesting, the movie just kind of ends, and they just don't really do much with it, unfortunately, and it just didn't really work for me. The cinematography here, honestly, I don't know why this was a futuristic setting. This is, once again, just feels like a needless way to cash in on the whole Blade Runner type setting, and it just didn't really work here at all. This felt so uninspired. It felt like such an afterthought, and I heard in the book it's not like that. It is basically our world, except that they're just banning books, and throughout the whole movie, I just kind of questioned, what would this be like if they would have just stuck with that? If they would have just kept it in a modern setting, but they're just burning books. I feel like it would have worked a lot better because they don't really do much with this setting at all. I mean, there are some cool things they do here and there, but like I said, the world building is very weak and there's not really much to it. I will admit there are actually some very effective scenes involving the fire. I think the fire actually does play a pretty big role here, and there are some really great visually stunning scenes, and I did think those were very well handled. The scores, whatever, I didn't really have much to say about, and the editing, like I said, the movie to me, it felt way too short. It felt like it should have been at least 2 hours long. They could have delved a lot deeper into these characters, and they just didn't. It felt very unfinished. It felt like it was just missing something, and it just didn't really feel complete to me. So, while I do think there are some really cool ideas in this movie, and there are some really good performances, in the end, this is just a very mediocre film that I was honestly very disappointed by. I know that HBO, you know, they were promoting this a lot, and I really thought this could have been something great. It doesn't really do much beyond the idea of them just burning these books. There's not really a reason for it. We don't really know who these characters are besides that. And like I said, the world building is incredibly weak. We just don't really care that much at the end of the day. And I wouldn't be surprised if someone did find this movie boring. For me, I never really found it, the first, like I said, 30 minutes I was really bored, but after that, I never really found it boring. I just really wanted a lot more from it. I can tell that there was effort put into this. I can tell that they definitely did try. It just felt like there was miscommunication somewhere, where they were trying to get some point across, and it just didn't happen. It didn't come to fruition for some reason. I just don't really understand how that really happened. I don't really know the reason why it didn't really work out for them, but in general, I really was not a fan of this film overall, and I am going to give Fahrenheit 451 overall a C. So like I said, guys, it's in my review of Fahrenheit 451. Let me know what you guys thought of this movie overall, their thoughts. And if you're fans of the book, let me know, like, what this movie really did change. Because like I said, I don't read the book. I didn't read it in school or anything like that, so I don't really have that much of a connection to it besides that. But that's in my review. Hope you guys enjoyed. See you guys in my next video, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.